Okay, what's up everyone? Today I thought I'd start a new series on the channel, which is just going to be just where I do normal puzzles on the chess.com puzzle trainer. And I titled the series The Climb to 3000 because that's really what I'm trying to do right now, just like in my own realm of chess improvement. I'm really trying to make that push for 3000, and I've gotten pretty close in the past, so I'm actually going to pull up my puzzles graph right now. If I figure out how to go here. Okay, I don't know. Let's see if, okay, that's kind of better, but kind of not. Let's take this. That's fine. Okay. Okay. That's okay. This is fine. I wanted to show this graph. My all-time graph. Let me just make sure this can be seen. Okay. Yeah, so what is this? Yeah, so this is my graph of all time. I started at the very end of 2020, so essentially 2021 is when I started, and we're just getting into 2023, so I've been doing this for a little over 2 years, and I just wanted to show my progress. I don't know, I feel like there's just not a lot of data on this, so, or at least that I've, really seen, so I just wanted to, like, kind of show at least my own journey, and, yeah, this is what it is. I mean, I started off with a very steady increase until about maybe like here, like 2,500, and it looks like that took me about a year to get to 2,500, after which I kind of plateaued for many months. After a while, just kind of had like a little spike, little excitement, but still kind of plateau for over a year, just plateau. And I mean, just recently, like at the beginning of this year, I've made a real push to make it to 3,000, which I think is really good. And yeah, I'm really happy to have made it this far, and I just want to continue to yeah, just make that 3,000 mark. And so I just wanted to share this for the beginning of the series, and I'm already at 2916, so I'm pretty close, but I know that in order to make it to 3,000, it's going to take a lot of focus and a lot of patience, and I clearly have that. I put that in, but it's just a matter of bringing it out again, and a real exercise of my skills, and so that's what I'm going for. So I guess with this tone set, we're gonna get into it, and I'm just gonna kind of like describe what's going on with my thoughts and everything. So yeah. Okay, so here's black to move. Black to move. We do a quick material count. We see that we're in exchange down, right? But we do have some assets going for us. Number one, the opponent's king is very weak. No squares that it can go to. No squares that it can go to, which immediately, and also notice that our knight is expendable. Our knight is not contributing to the control of any squares around the king. In other words, if we moved the knight, then we would still be controlling all the same squares around the king, and the king would have nowhere to go. So just the first idea is to just reposition the knight with tempo, and ultimately have it land on one of these checking squares. Yeah, I mean, because it would just end in mate, and that seems very strong to me. So this is clearly going to be a candidate move, which puts tempo on the bishop and starts the journey, for example, to reposition the knight. If we can put tempo and then go back to g6, well, then we have strong control over this square. It's unclear what the opponent can do, if anything, to prevent this idea. And once our knight lands on f5 or f4 like this, it's just mate. That's idea number one. Okay, idea number two is we have this passed pawn that's really close to becoming a queen. So maybe we can combine our idea of repositioning our knight with tempo in order to aim to deliver checkmate very quickly by controlling the h5 square around the king. Maybe we can combine that and either gain more tempo with our knight, or just use our knight to not only threaten this mating idea, but also to maybe mess up this rook's influence of the game so that we can push our pass pawn forward. This just seems like a beautiful move to me because it comes with tempo, it sets up a clear idea that seems very hard to stop, and we're just centralizing our knight. So it's going to be useful in all spheres of the board, in all sectors of the board, right? So I really like this. Kind of a throwaway candidate move that we can just look at and evaluate pretty quickly, I think, is just playing a2. Playing a2 right now, there's just rook takes a2. I don't really see any value in that. I think there's value in pointing out all the different types of forcing moves, and clearly a2 is a forcing move because we're trying to promote to a queen. But I think just rook a2 at this point is troublesome for us. But we do realize that our opponent's rook is tied down to the second rank. If this rook leaves the second rank, then we are afforded the opportunity to play a2, which puts us one step closer to making a queen. All right, so I'm just making a mental note to myself that if this rook is tied down to the second rank, so if it ever has to leave the second rank for some reason, then I'm looking back. I'm going to consider a2. What's this music? I don't like this. Okay. So now I just want to look at like what my opponent has going for them. My opponent has this mass of pawns, but they're clearly controlled right now by my dark squared bishop and by my pawn on the dark squares. So our opponent is not making this entire chunk of material felt in the game right now, which I feel like is a really big problem for them and something that they might aim to fix. Now, in terms of rapid ways to fix that problem, the only thing I really see is just to give up a pawn, sack a pawn. My bishop becomes my bishop loses control over the h4 square, which allows the king to free up, and also generates an open file, semi-open file for the opponent's rook, where they can then hit my bishop, put pressure on this pawn, and maybe think about advancing. I don't really know if the rook even wants to come to this file, but it is an additional option maybe for the future, because right now I think the rook is well placed and threatening to push forward eventually. So I really like this idea of knight e4, just kind of looking around. You know, maybe the last thing I would do before I dive into a line and start calculating is see like what this light squared bishop has to offer to the board. And you know, honestly, like I think white's pieces only really make sense after this pawn push to e5. And that just gives me even more reason to play knight e4, or sorry, knight e5, because we permanently stop that idea. So other than having influence on this h7 to b1 diagonal, I don't really think this bishop makes sense anywhere else. I mean, it can come to one of these two squares and start influencing these diagonals, but these diagonals are going to be worthless without the help of the rook. And I don't know, that's just going to take some reorganization. That's going to take some time for the opponent, and that's fine. That, you know, they might want to do that, but the idea is that if it takes them too much time, then we might already be able to strike. The iron might already be hot, and they might just lose the game on the spot. So I think with that being said, we have a lot of flexibility in what we can do, because our opponent's pieces just don't make sense. We're dominating the opponent's pawns because we're controlling the dark squares in front of them, and the structure is very rigid. It's not really going to change anytime soon without any serious concession. So I really, really am attached to this move, knight e5. So I'm going to start calculating it, right? So knight e5, I feel like the most obvious thing to look at is what if we just get forked, but I've already figured this out. So if knight e5 and then f4, I mean, we're taking the free bishop. That's a big idea of knight e5. So we're going to d3, and then of course if our opponent decides to reciprocate the greediness by taking our bishop, then we just come over to f4. We're forking the rook, forking the king. The king has got to move. King actually only has one square to move to, and then we take the rook. We're clearly winning here. We haven't forgotten about our passed pawn, which is now going to be felt, because there are no more pieces that the opponent has that can, no more firepower to prevent this pawn's motion. So knight e5, f4 doesn't work. f4 doesn't work, and why was that so easy to see for me? Well, it's just because I recognize that these pieces make no sense. Like, this is really sad for white. White's pieces don't make sense at all. And so it doesn't take a lot of work to see, like, it doesn't take a lot of work to see that they just don't have anything to do. So after knight e5, our opponent has to respond somehow. If they don't move the bishop, they're going to need to protect the bishop. But they can't protect the bishop at all, right? Because the only way in this position, there are two ways to protect the bishop, both of which involve moving the rook onto the diagonal that's already controlled by our dark squared bishop. That basically means that our bishop is doing good work. in the position. So just for the sake of calculation, knight e5 and rook f2, or rook to d2, we just snap that off, and then we win the game. We just win the game, because it's going to be a lot easier to push this past pawn when this rook is gone. So the next thing I would kind of look at is what counter punches does the opponent have? I mean, if our opponent decides they don't really want to save the bishop, what other counter punches do they have? In all honesty, they don't have a lot. I mean, they could, maybe come and munch on the pawn. We would just take. You can come down here. My king is going to be chilling. Maybe you win another pawn right here, but we have these two pieces. And this is very good. So our opponent is not left with a lot of options. So I think the opponent has to move the bishop. The opponent is essentially forced to move the bishop. So where to move the bishop? Well, if we're talking about white's piece setup, and we've talked so much about how it doesn't make any sense, what could white do to make it make more sense? Well, I think that there's a few options. There's the geometric move, which is bishop b5. What does that do? Well, it dominates my knight, right? It's now controlling all the squares that my knight can really hop to on the queen side of the board. Okay, beyond that, the bishop doesn't really have more purpose here without coordination with the rook. But it's going to be difficult for the rook to coordinate, say, on a square like d2 or d7, because the rook does not have easy access to the d file. If rook d2, we snap it off. So we have to see something like rook e1 and rook d1. Or the rook comes over, munches on the pawn, and then repositions. Those things take a lot of time, and I don't think the opponent has that time. So another approach for the bishop is to come all the way back to b1. And the idea there is simply just to have control of the pawn, of my passed pawn, and reposition onto this diagonal. The bishop would have loved to play this move, this bishop c4 move, but at this point we would just snap it off with the knight, of course. So an alternative approach to that, to hop on that same diagonal, is to go all the way back to b1 and then come to a2 when the bishop is blockading our pawn, and it's starting to make a little bit of sense. It has a nice open diagonal. Maybe there are some things that the rook can do now after it comes down, and things, are making a little bit more sense to white. It doesn't seem like they're concrete threats just yet, but white's getting close. White's improving the position. So we need to consider, I don't see a whole lot of difference between white's bishop moves. So I'm just going to look at bishop b1. Well, after bishop b1, I see no reason not to continue with our plan of going for the throw, going for the immediate mate by trying to land our knight onto c4, or to f4. So I think we just play knight g6, and it creates this really strong one-move threat of playing knight f4. Now, we just have to ask ourselves,